Now, welcome to part 13 of my story that will, in a way, both carry on the Star Wars sequel trilogy or continue the journey of some of its characters, while also sort of rewriting or undoing the story of the sequels at the same time. Or as I like to put it, this is a story of how what comes next will change what came before. And if you're new to the story, or you haven't seen the first dozen parts yet, or you're not caught up, I would highly recommend either catching up or starting with part 1, and if you enjoy it, working your way back to this one. Otherwise, what's going on right now in the story will make no sense to you whatsoever. A link to the playlist can be found in the description below. And now, without further ado, let's get back to the story. We begin with a quick montage of events, of Luke Skywalker aboard an Imperial starship easily making his way through a host of Dark Troopers before reaching the bridge. Once there, he encounters Grogu, the one who put out a call into the Force that he heard, the one he has come for, the one he has foreseen can safeguard the Jedi Order for many generations to come. And after watching a touching goodbye between Grogu and the Mandalorian who has protected him, Luke, followed closely by R2, takes him back to his X-Wing, and soon enough the two are away and in space, with Grogu seated on Luke's lap as he pilots the ship. Soon enough, Luke is nodding his head to something that the child is apparently communicating to him telepathically, and then Luke says to him, Yes, I've heard of Ahsoka Tano, but I thought she was... Luke apparently gets cut off telepathically. He listens for a moment, then continues. You encountered her on Corvus. She was looking for someone named Grand Admiral Thrawn? Luke seems to listen to yet more from Grogu before again continuing. I see. She thought you might end up making your way to me soon enough, that I'd be looking for new students to rebuild the Order, and that Anakin even spoke to her and told her I'd need help, that she'd make her way to me soon enough as well. Luke then leans back a bit as his face goes somewhat distant, as if both trying to reach out through the Force and make sense of everything he'd just heard. After a few moments of silence, Grogu suddenly and excitedly reaches out towards the X-Wing's controls. He then glances up at Luke, who, pulled back to the present now, smiles down at him and says, Yes, you can fly this ship for a while. Luke then turns and looks over his shoulder towards R2 and gives him a subtle nod of the head as if to tell his trusty astromech to keep tabs on everything, to make sure Grogu doesn't fly them into a star or something while he reaches out through the Force again, which is exactly what Luke does. He shuts his eyes and takes a calming breath to meditate on everything he's just heard. And how much time goes by while Luke is doing that is hard to tell. It could be seconds, it could be minutes, but he's suddenly yanked free from his meditation by the urgent and panicked beeps of R2-D2. It takes Luke a second or two to put everything together, to realize what's going on, but soon enough he notices that Grogu has punched in hyperspace coordinates and is about to hit the button that will indeed take them into hyperspace. Luke cries out to wait and reaches out his hand to stop Grogu, but he's not fast enough, and the child hits the button, and immediately the X-Wing makes the jump. Luke shuts his eyes tight, half expecting them to immediately fly too close to the nearest star and end their trip real quick. But instead, when he opens his eyes again, he finds them moving smoothly through a swirling blue hyperspace tunnel. He then again glances over his shoulder at R2, giving a look as if to say, You were supposed to stop him from doing that exact thing. But R2 beeps back as if to say, for some reason, he couldn't stop him. R2 then lets out another series of beeps and whistles, this time sounding like he's asking if he'd like to take them out of hyperspace, that their course isn't leading them to anywhere on any of his galactic star charts. But Luke returns his focus back to Grogu and sees that the child is pointing forward and giving him a wide-eyed and excited expression as if implying he's trying to take him somewhere, despite what the maps may say. He shakes his head and says, No, R2, that's okay. Let's see where he's taking us. R2 lets out a protesting beep, and Luke says, Perhaps the galactic maps for that sector are incomplete. Besides, I hope, he knows what he's doing. Next, we're taken to the planet Coruscant, to an oddly familiar apartment located at nearly the top of a skyscraper high amongst the clouds. An apartment that once belonged to Padme Amidala, but now belongs to her daughter Leia Organa Solo. And we see Leia heading towards the door after a chime has been heard indicating someone is here, and instead of Leia's usual calm, if not stoic expression, there's a rather anxious one upon her face. And we immediately realize why that's the case when the door slides open and there stands, looking rather nervous herself, Ahsoka Tano with Sabine Wren at her side. Leia and Ahsoka just stare at each other for an extended moment in time, before both seem to be overcome by something and end up briefly hugging. Leia then finally turns to Sabine and says, "It's good to see you again too." "Likewise," Sabine says back as Leia ushers the two into her apartment. And as Ahsoka enters, she looks around and says, "So strange to be back here, to be back in her old apartment." Leia then says, "It was actually Luke's idea. I have a way of sensing things through the Force, like experiencing old memories of a place, though they're mostly just feelings and vague images. Anyway, he thought staying here might erase some of my memories of Vader and replace them with images and feelings of our real father." Ahsoka gives a grin of fond remembrance and says, "Yes, Anakin did spend quite a bit of time here. Every free moment he could, actually." Leia gives Ahsoka a questioning look and begins, "Did you?" Ahsoka smiles and finishes, "Did I know? Yes, though I never really spoke to him about it. I sometimes wonder how things would have turned out if I had." Ahsoka offers Leia an apologetic look and says, "For that I'm sorry. You were robbed of your real parents because of my inaction." But Leia quickly shakes her head and waves that away and says, "We can't change the past. In the end, let's just be thankful Palpatine was stopped and that the days of the Empire being a genuine threat to this galaxy are no more. Only a handful of remnants now remain, and the New Republic will handle them soon enough." At that, Sabine and Ahsoka exchange a look, and it's Sabine who says, "Yeah, about all that." Ahsoka then continues when Sabine falls silent. "The remnants of the Empire are much stronger than the New Republic knows, and they are being led by none other than Grand Admiral Thrawn." Leia shakes her head as if she doesn't want to believe that. Ahsoka then continues, "I'm afraid there's even more. Palpatine isn't exactly gone. It's a long story, a very long story, but he has returned." Once again, Leia shakes her head as if she will not believe. She even says, "Just the thought of that is ridiculous. Palpatine is dead and gone." Ahsoka nods her head as if she understands exactly how she feels, but then says, "I wish that were so, but Palpatine's spirit endured, and is now possessing a young woman who herself is very strong with the Force. This is a very grave threat." Leia then turns away from them and walks towards and looks out one of the many windows of the apartment and at the endless city beyond. That's when Sabine says, "I'm afraid there's even a little more yet. Ahsoka has spoken with Magistrate Morgan Elspeth on Corvus. You may remember that name from the days of the Empire. Seems she's been helping facilitate Thrawn's rebuilding of the Imperial Navy. Also mentioned other, even more secret projects the remnants of the Empire might be up to. Either way, she believes Thrawn is preparing for some sort of attack on the New Republic." Leia turns to face them and asks where. Sabine answers, "My guess is Lothal. It's the site of Thrawn's greatest defeat, pretty much his only defeat, actually." Leia begins to shake her head once again and says, "The Senate won't believe any of this without proof. They'll want to believe it even less than I do, actually." Sabine then fires back, "Well, they can either believe it now or believe it after the fact when it's too late to do anything about it." She then takes a few steps towards Leia and continues, "Right now, we could have the element of surprise on our side, which is the only chance we'll have against Thrawn. He won't be ready for a full-scale coordinated counterattack on Lothal. At least he probably won't be." Sabine gives a bit of a shrug and continues, "All I know is with any luck, we could end this all before it really begins again." For a very, very long moment, Leia thinks about all this in silence. Finally, her head begins to nod, and she makes her way over to her desk to a control panel there. As she hits some keys to contact someone, she says to them, "I know just the two people who might be able to help us, that might be able to make something happen, even without, shall we say, full approval from the New Republic." A spark of hope ignites on Sabine's face, and she asks who, while Ahsoka remains silent and thoughtful. Leia then glances up at Sabine and says, "Admiral Akbar and Wedge Antilles." Sabine looks as if she can't believe her ears, and she repeats the name. "Wedge Antilles?" Leia again glances up at Sabine and asks, "You know him?" "Know him," Sabine begins. "I'm the one that got him out of Star Strike Academy and into the rebellion." Leia shakes her head in disbelief and comments, "Small galaxy." And Sabine responds, "Yeah, sometimes it certainly does feel that way." We're then taken elsewhere in the galaxy, to an ancient Jedi temple on a snowy, mountainous world, and one that is apparently quickly becoming frozen once again by the looks of Finn and Mara Jade, who are bundled up in the warmest clothing they could find, their breath visible in white puffs of steam, as they slowly walk together through one of the many twisting corridors of the temple. And we hear Finn say, "We've got a day left here at most before the cold starts to get really bad." But Mara, as if not hearing what Finn just said, says herself, "He should have been back by now." Finn can't help but smile and let out a small chuckle, and this Mara notices, and she quickly, accusingly, looks at him and demands to know what's so funny. Finn responds, "You, worried about Luke? Wasn't so long ago the mere mention of his name made your face turn like you just drank sour bantha milk." Mara only glares at Finn as he pulls out a small cylindrical object from his pocket and hands it in her direction and says, "Don't forget, he left his personal communicator in case we really needed to get a hold of him. So if you're so concerned..." Finn then falls silent and only chuckles, which is when the two almost literally run into Poe, who is shaking his head and immediately says to them, "Yeah, I think we're about done here. It's getting way too cold. I can barely focus, not to mention those ancient databases are beginning to freeze up. We could try to move them to my ship, but I'm not so sure how they'd hold up against being transported." That's when they all hear a beeping, and Finn quickly realizes it's coming from the communicator in his hand. We briefly see a look of relief cross Mara's face, figuring it to be Luke. Instead, when Finn hits a button on it, we hear a voice say, Luke, are you there? It's me, it's Leia." That's when Poe's face goes white, as if he's just seen or heard a ghost. Finn then looks at Poe and sees the face, understands the emotion behind Poe again hearing the voice of a woman who is not only a mentor, but almost like a mother to him after he lost his at such a young age. Finn, not sure what he'd even say, then hands the communicator to Poe, who takes it with a trembling hand. He then hits the button and says, "This is Poe Dam," but he cuts himself off, figuring maybe he shouldn't use a name that Leia would likely recognize, considering she knew his parents, and it's also the name of someone who'd only be a couple years old right now. Poe then continues, Luke isn't here right now, but maybe there's something we could help you with?" Leia responds, "Well, Poe Dam, forgive me if I'm a little less than trusting of someone who has a Luke's personal communicator." Poe quickly responds, I know this doesn't look good, but believe me, trust me, I'm on your side, General." There's a long pause before Leia says, "Where is Luke exactly?" Poe answers, "In search of a possible Jedi student that he thinks the Empire may have captured. The ship is somewhere in deep space. He didn't know if communication was going to be possible, and so he left us with this. And apparently a lot of Imperial ships are in deep space too. Apparently, somehow Palpatine has also returned." There's another long silence before Leia says, "I see. You're not the only one to say something like that to me recently, which is why I need to get a hold of Luke." Once more there is a long pause, and when she speaks again, it almost feels like there is a type of trust in her voice. "When you see Luke again, tell him to contact me immediately. Tell him that we fear the Empire might be preparing to make an attack against Lothal." Poe, tears in his eyes, nods his head and simply says, "I'll do that, General." He then hands the communicator back to Finn, who once again puts it in his pocket after it's clear Leia is gone. That's when suddenly Mara starts walking away. Poe and Finn exchange a look, and it's Finn who asks, "Where are you going?" Mara pauses, gives him a look over her shoulder, like it's a dumb question, then says as she starts walking again, "Isn't it obvious? We're going to Lothal." Finn then says, "What about Luke?" Mara, still walking and not turning her head this time, just says, "Something tells me we'll eventually catch up with him there." Next, we're taken elsewhere in the galaxy, to high above a green world streaked with numerous rivers and dotted with small bodies of water. We then see an X-Wing come out of hyperspace, Luke's X-Wing to be exact, and inside the cockpit we see Luke give the world a look over, and he says something about how it almost reminds him of Dagobah. We then hear R2 let out a series of beeps and whistles, and Luke says to that, So it's really not on any known star charts, huh? I wonder what's down there, why he led us here. That's when Luke finally notices Grogu, who is now reaching out towards the planet beyond the cockpit's canopy, an excited yet somehow sad look upon his face. Luke then asks, "What is it? What's down there?" Grogu then looks up at him, and though we don't hear it, Luke repeats the single word Grogu utters in his mind. Home. And that is where this part ends. Well, that's all I've got for you this time, and I'm sorry this was a shorter episode. Originally, I actually wanted to wrap up the series this week with a mega long episode, but time simply did not permit that. And I mainly wanted to do that to finish up this week because next Tuesday is my wife's birthday and we will be gone for a couple days, so I don't know if I'd be able to get an episode done, and I didn't want to leave people hanging and waiting for the finale. But now I might end up unintentionally kind of doing that anyway because I'm not entirely sure when the next episode will be up. I may try to get another shorter one up next Tuesday, or I may skip a week and have an extra long one and likely a final one the week after that. Again, not entirely sure how it'll all work out just yet, but yes, the end is coming one way or another, which I know many of you have said you're not ready for, or you're hoping this story will continue. And that is certainly a possibility. Unfortunately, this has not been my most popular fanfiction in terms of views, which for better or worse does matter because a lot of time, as you can imagine, goes into making these videos. And obviously, well, I do have to factor in how much time I devote to something that is not doing very well for the channel. That said, I've been really enjoying this story and obviously telling it, and it's been great to see that people have been enjoying it despite the fact that it is sequel related, which has been the reason many people don't want to watch it. Anyway, we will see what happens next. We will see what happens with a part 2 or a continuation. But for now, it's time to leave your comments below and tell me what you thought of this part of the story and what you think might happen next. So let's talk some Star Wars, and until next time, thanks for watching.